talk about blackness and what happens in black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
It's Tuesday, October the 11th, 2022. I'm attorney Robert Patillo, sitting in for Roland Martin on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Roland's giving a speech at Morehouse College right now. Here's what's coming up today on Roland Martin Unfiltered. A Texas jury acquits a police officer for killing an unarmed black woman with a mental health crisis. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump will join us, along with the family of the victim, to discuss what are the next steps. We'll tell you why folks in Gulfport, Mississippi are demanding the body cam footage of an officer shooting a black teen in the head be released. DNA test results moved Baltimore prosecutors to drop charges against Adnan Syed in a murder of his ex-girlfriend. He is now a free man. First, she resigned. Now, the Los Angeles City Council President, Nury Martinez, is taking a leave of absence since the audio of her racist comments has been released. Additionally, an investment company is creating economic opportunities in Tanzania. The guys from the Ward Holding International will be here to tell us about their plan. Additionally, for the past couple of weeks, young women in Iran have been leading protests around the murder of Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish woman who died in the custody of the morality police. And the youngest, and we will be talking to Reverend S. Todd Ury about that. Finally, the youngest licensed pilot will stop by to tell us about his amazing accomplishments. Also, in our marketplace segment, we'll be introducing you to the first black-owned sliced bread company in the world. They say the best things in sliced bread. We're going to be introducing you to a black company that's revolutionizing sliced bread. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing, putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin.
Texas jury acquitted an officer who shot a grandmother to death who was suffering a mental health crisis. She was shot 8 times. The Baytown police officer, Juan Manuel de la Cruz, was found not guilty of first-degree aggravated assault by a public servant in the death of Pamela Turner. Let's see the video of that now.
Pop the
The incident caught on video happened in an apartment parking lot in May of 2019. De La Cruz shot Turner in the face, chest, and her side. De La Cruz claimed he feared for his life. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump joins us from Texas now to discuss, along with Chelsea Rubin, Pamela Turner's daughter, and Antoinette Dorsey James, Pamela Turner's sister. Attorney Crump, how are you doing this evening?
It's yours. Mine, brother.
All right, we're gonna return to Ben Crump in just a second. I'm going to turn to our panel to discuss this until we can get Attorney Crump on. All right, we're going to talk to the sister and the daughter until we can get Attorney Crump on. Chelsea Rubin, Antoinette Dorsey James, how are you ladies doing this evening?
We hanging in there.
Not.
Thank you both so much for joining us. Let's understand. Can you tell us a little bit about Ms. Turner? For the people who just read the headlines, tell us about her, the woman, the individual, because often we read these headlines, but we don't find out about the person themselves.
My mom was a very generous person, very sweet.
She was a great mother. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. She was a new grandmother and loved her grandkids more than life. Um, she would give you the shirt off of her back if you needed it. She was a medical professional for 20 years and retired due to her mental illness. And she just was a wonderful, kind spirit. And it's very sad that this officer got to walk as a free man today. She didn't deserve to die.
And Antoinette, can you talk a little bit about the mental health issues that she was suffering and why this officer wasn't trained to handle mental health crises?
I'm not sure if he was trained or not how to handle it, but I know he didn't handle it correctly. As a police officer, a public servant, he should have had training to handle it. Since he had been dealing with her, he knowed her issues. He talked to Chelsea about her issues, her mental health issues. He claimed he wanted to help her. Um, the whole police department knew of her issues because I have called, talked to them about the way they was handling because of her mental health.
And Attorney Ben Crump has joined us. Attorney Crump, can you explain to us what the jury's rationale was and issuing a acquittal even in the lower charge of manslaughter in this case? What exactly was the reasoning behind this?
Well, there was only one charge presented to the jury, no manslaughter charge. It was aggravated conduct on behalf of a public servant. And so what Chelsea, Antoinette, and all of us witnessed in that courtroom was the judge denied evidence that we think was germane, that was crucial, being given to the jury. Like the fact that they never were able to be told that the officer who killed her had a familiarity with her. They knew one another. They had interactions with one another. He denied them for letting them communicate that to the jury. Also denied them from being told that she had mental health issues. In the civil case, that is the reason why we're going to be able to sue Baytown, hopefully for millions of dollars, because you can't treat mental ill people this way when you know they have mental issues. And lastly, he admitted on his video reenactment why he called Pamela Turner's name in the system in the first place was because he knew that her and the apartment leasing manager had got into an argument the day before. And so he was intentionally running her name, we believe, to see if there was some reason he had to have an interaction with her. As the prosecutor said that they had a warrant division in Baytown Police that he could have simply notified, or he could have had the mental health team at the Baytown Police Department have the interaction with her, and Pam Turner would have lived. But the judge denied any of that information from going to the jury. And as Antoinette has said, that this judge did not treat Pam fairly, did not give her any dignity, and did not offer her humanity with any of his rulings. He was always pro-police, it seemed, in every ruling.
And with that, because it sounds like there are processes in place to deal with mental health crises, did any evidence come out as to why those protocols were not followed?
Well, it seems to be that this officer lived in that apartment complex for free. And so therefore, him and the apartment manager had a relationship with one another, and he admitted that the reason he ran her name through the system was because of this argument that the manager had with Pam. So when you really think about it, he's not just going through the apartment complex running people randomly. He intentionally picked Pam, ran her name, and intentionally had this interaction with somebody who he knew had mental health issues, and that when you have mental health issues, you don't always respond as a ordinary, reasonable person will respond. And if you listen to Antoinette, she will only defend herself when she's bullied or picked on. And that's exactly what Pamela Turner was doing. She was defending herself from the police accosting her. He confronted her.
And just on that point, you mentioned the civil suit going forward. What measures need to be taken by not just this, but other police departments to better address mental health issues in the community? Because it seems that there's a one-size-fits-all solution, which generally ends up with someone being abused or killed by officers.
Exactly. The color of your skin and the state of your mental health status should not determine whether you get a death sentence or not when you have a confrontation with the police. But for far too many black people, that is exactly what happens. We are sentenced to death for having mental health issues, where other people is treated like a medical issue. For us, it's treated like a criminal issue. And furthermore, I cannot let my comments go without saying, yet again, another black woman has been killed by a police officer and not held accountable. There has never been in the history of the United States of America where a jury has returned a felony conviction for a police killing a black woman.
I want to go back to Antoinette on this issue of family support for mental individuals working their way through mental health. I don't think there's a single family in this country that has not had somebody dealing with a mental health crisis. Talk a little bit about what Pamela meant to the family, what she meant to the community. We seem to define people by their challenges, but not by their successes. I want people to really understand who Pamela was.
Pam was very sociable. She loved people. She just always seemed to find the best in people. She made friends very easily. Uh, the night that she was killed, some of her neighbors got on, made statements on how if their day was going bad, Pam would come around and crack a joke and cheer them up. That's the kind of person she is. She wasn't a hostile person. She was just a friendly person. Wanted to be accepted just like you, me, and everybody else. Um, and as far as what it means to me, that's my baby. I mean, I wasn't fortunate to have children, but when her mom gave her to me and she loved me unconditionally as I loved her, that's my baby. You know, he took my baby away from me. She, even grown, was my baby before her kids. You know, it just it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking, and I mean, I'm just tired of being tired.
Attorney Crump, we talk a lot about the civil suits against police departments, but we still haven't been able to pierce qualified immunity in many cases. What can the community do to stand up and to stop this from being a continuing narrative so that we can get some type of systemic change that's necessary to make sure that human life, and particularly the lives of black women, are respected in this country?
You know, unfortunately, we had a golden opportunity to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that would have addressed a lot of these issues, but because of political partisanship, we failed to get that bill passed. And so now we have to look to local and state interaction and legislative action to do the job that the federal government won't do. You know, we get the civil justice, we win all the time in getting our clients monetary recovery, but what we truly want to do is get full justice to make sure that this officer, this cop killer who shot her while she was on the ground and he was on his feet is held accountable so it could be a deterrent to stop other black and brown people from being killed unjustly. And so we have to continue to fight on every front, just like we did with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. We had over 100 municipal codes and 100 state laws passed in their name, and we're going to have to do the same in the name of Pam Turner.
Absolutely. And Chelsea, I wanted to circle back around to you because we saw during the trial the officer say that he was afraid for his life. What would you say to an individual of this nature who, instead of simply engaging and talking, uses this tired line about being afraid for their life? Tell us what you would say to those individuals who claim up and down that somehow someone going through a crisis is a danger to them.
Don't be a police officer. Don't choose the profession that you chose. Don't say that you're going to protect and serve because you obviously cannot do it. You do not fit the part. It's not for you. So if you feared for your life, get out of the job.
Absolutely. And Attorney Crump, just I'll give you last statements on this. What can we do to, one, help support this family, but two, help to pass those sorts of laws that are necessary so we don't have to keep doing this month after month and year after year and decade after decade? What can we as a community do to help stop this in its tracks? We got an election coming in 4 weeks. What are the things the community needs to know?
Obviously, voting matters, but also what we can do is learn how important it is to serve on jury duty and to learn how important it is to vote our conscience and not give in because our white brothers and sisters want to come and make America great. And so they come to the trial and they have their mind made up that they're going to make a point. We have to be as convicted as them, come to trial and say, we saw this black woman get executed, and there's nothing you can say to me that's going to have me vote not guilty. Black people can't always cave. We got to take a stand, too, like our white brothers and sisters take stands for issues they believe in. That's how we make the difference, and we got to start talking about it on Roland, Martin, and Filter every day. We got to talk about it in black churches and schools, teaching black people how to serve on juries and how to make sure that justice is administered.
Thank you so much. Attorney Ben Crump doing the Lord's work as always. We thank you for all that you do. Antoinette James Turner and Pamela Rubin, we pray for you and your families. If there's anything that we can do, feel free to reach out. The community offers you our love and support. We thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. And now we're going to go to our panel. We're joined now by Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for the Environmental Justice EPA, and also Randy Bryant, diversity and inclusion strategist, speaker, trainer, and writer. Dr. Ali, I'll start with you. We hear these stories far too often about African Americans who are dealing with mental health issues, who are executed or in other ways abused. What do you think has to be the permanent solution to this? We cannot keep having these piecemeal civil verdicts, but what can we do systemically to stop this from happening?
Well, I think we have to have a holistic set of strategies, as Attorney Crump shared with us. The first part that we often forget about is the power that exists inside of our vote. So our vote can literally make sure that we put mayors in, if they're playing a role, or city councils in making decisions about whom is going to lead the law enforcement in that respective city or county. Our vote is also powerful in making sure that we have judges who are sitting on the bench who are going to do a much better job in making sure that they're taking in all the facts, including making sure that our communities receive the full weight of the law being done in a positive way instead of a negative way where we continue to let these folks off. We also got to make sure that we have the right pieces of legislation in place. We talk about the George Floyd Act. But there are a number of other pieces of legislation that have found success across the country in places like Alexandria, Virginia, and Denver, Colorado, and Gainesville, Georgia, where they actually are making sure that mental health practitioners are also there with law enforcement when someone is having a mental health crisis. And they've also seen some successes with that. So people are always saying, well, show me where success is. Well, those are some examples, along with others across the country. And then, of course, we have to continue, unfortunately, to use the other side where we're suing these individuals after brothers and sisters have lost their lives. It never brings them back. But hopefully, as Ben shared with us, that it will make sure that some of these other police departments begin to have tougher conversations with their folks and making sure the right training is in place, because it is just mind-boggling to me that you have a senior on the ground and you shoot her 3 times. It makes no sense whatsoever. There's no justification for it. And we just got to make sure there's stronger accountability. So it is about voting. It is also about legislation. And it is also about hitting people in their pockets.
Well, you mentioned the election, and we have an election coming up in 4 weeks. Look at what the Democratic Party platform is. Recently 538 and some of the other predictors are saying there's a 70% chance of Democrats keeping the United States Senate. But we haven't heard even Democrats making criminal justice reform a big part of their platform going into 2022. Once Republicans branded it defund the police, they got so scared they seemed to run away from it. What do you do? What are people to do when they say, well, we turned out in record numbers in 2020 to get Biden into the White House. We turned out in record numbers in the runoff in 2021 for Warnock and Ossoff to get Democrats to Senate. And here we are 2+ years later at another election. And here these folks are asking for our votes again without anything being done. What do you say to those people to encourage them to not lose faith, to not lose hope, to not stay home?
Well, one of the things that I share with folks is I'm out across the country, and everybody knows I've worked in over 1,000 communities, is that if you can't find somebody who's truly going to represent you, somebody who's going to stand up, somebody who's not going to slide backwards, then you got to give some consideration of running for office yourself, both on the local, the county, the state, and the federal level. The other thing is, if we are supporting candidates with our dollars, then there has to be expectation. That means that we got to be out there having conversations with them about the issues that we find of significance, and making sure that they are completely 100% anchored to them, and be very clear with them. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. If you're not doing the right thing, then you're not going to receive my vote. So we should make sure that we're very clear with folks, but we should also make sure that we are running candidates who come from our communities, who are us in many instances. And that also will help to change some of these dynamics where we continue to vote for the same folks. They know we're going to vote for them, so they don't go as far as we need them to. We got to mix it up a little bit and make sure that, Mr. Johnson is running for office, and a whole bunch of our other folks.
Thanks. And we're joined by Randy Bryant, now diversity and inclusion specialist. We're talking about the police murder and ultimate acquittal of Pamela Turner. So, Randy, what do you think has to happen with police training? Do we need to have more Black police chiefs? Do we need to have diversity and inclusion training for police around the country for them to just give the same grace to African Americans they do to other groups? As Attorney Crump mentioned, there's never been a police officer convicted of a felony for killing a Black woman in the history of this country. And we saw the same thing with the killing of Katherine Johnson here in Atlanta a decade or so ago. What has to happen to change the culture inside of police departments?
As much as I believe in training, I believe that accountability is the only thing that is going to change what's happening right now, that police officers feel as if they have a license to murder us in these streets and get away with it. And they do. And so until they are held accountable, they know they're not supposed to do what they do. They're aware of it. They're aware they have had anti-bias training. It's not the training. It's the understanding that they can do it and get away with it. Make it where their pensions are tied to the payouts that they sometimes have to face. Make it where that they're immediately fired and not put on, administrative leave. Make it where there's some real consequences. And I promise you things will change.
I find it interesting that if you look at revolutionary movements around the globe right now, we're going to, in a next segment, talk about the protest in Iran. If you look at the things coming out on Telegram, they're flying Black Lives Matter flags in Iran as they're protesting against the regime. If you look at some of the images coming out of the Ukraine as they're liberating places like Donbass in the Luhansk region, the offensive of Kherson, there are people flying Black Lives Matter flags that they're pushing the Russians out of of their territory. If you look at the Uyghur population, the Xinjiang province in Western China, they're flying Black Lives Matter flags because this has become a casus belli for any group that's fighting back against authoritarian regimes. But that being said, the fact that people around the world are rallying to the cause against authoritarian abuse of minority communities, why do you think it is, Randy, that it's been so hard to get things changed here at home where it started? Even 2 years post George Floyd, we still have zero federal legislation to address the issues that started the Freedom Summer in 2020. What will it take politically, not just to change the mind of swing and middling voters, but just to get Democrats on board with the agenda that they campaigned on in 2020 and that they're promising us in 2022?
Less fear. I mean, we have set up in our politics that when you speak out against police brutality, because there's so much power and money behind for police forces, that people don't win, they don't succeed. And so we need to have people who are unafraid. We need to have politicians who will stand up and say, absolutely not. I am willing to put my career on the line so that we can protect Black people, Black and brown bodies. That's what it's going to take. It was interesting to me how, the differences that we see in the reactions when another community is affected and not just Black lives. The outrage that we see that we don't see with us. I mean, it's so baked into who we are as Americans. America was founded on the very idea that Black people are supposed to be oppressed, that we're less than, that there's white supremacy. And so it is hard to make that change. It's hard to change the mindset. And it's scary. It's scary, and politicians need to be brave. And once they get in politics, they need to stop negotiating with our lives. There should be zero.
And Mustafa, to paraphrase H. Rap Brown, white supremacy as American is cherry pie. How can we get this out or get this out of the policing system, this adherence to white supremacy philosophy, this conceptualization of African Americans, whether they be a 12-year-old child like Tamir Rice or a 60-year-old woman like Pamela Turner, are just inherently a threat and need to be put down the same way you would put down a rabid animal? Well, how can we take this out of policing and make sure that we are getting officers who have this belief system, as Pamela Turner's daughter said, out of the profession of policing?
It's tough. W.E.B. Du Bois once shared with us that a system cannot fail those it was never meant to protect. We have to understand that law enforcement was put in place not to protect our communities all the way back to when we were enslaved, with slave patrols and a number of other dynamics. And as we move forward, we've seen that they have never served in protecting our communities with any significance. So how do we change this dynamic? That's why a lot of folks are talking about the reforms that need to happen. For some folks, it's about continual psychological analyses, of the individuals who say that they want to serve in this profession, to make sure that you're catching those biases that exist, to also catch if somebody's going through, PTSD or a number of other types of dynamics that are going on. The other part, as my sister shared, is about real accountability. If someone has, just even police brutality, they don't necessarily have to kill somebody. That's not an individual who deserves to be able to wear that badge. I have law enforcement folks in my family. I've worked with folks over the years. There are good police officers out there, and we have to sort of, keep a spotlight also on the good ones to make sure that we can get rid of the bad ones. But we also got to address the police unions, and we know the dynamics that they continue to protect individuals who do very nefarious things inside of our community. So the power that exists inside of that union has to be addressed. And then we've also got to make sure that we have the judges once again, because the judges play a critical role. There is a relationship that exists between law enforcement and the folks who are operating in our judicial system. So we've got to make sure that there are a number of different pieces that are being addressed if we ever want to find justice in relationship to the actions that happen from law enforcement inside of our communities.
You bring up the judges. I think that's a very important point because people remember during the apartheid regime, towards the end, as they saw it falling apart, what the ruling white population did was entrench themselves within the bureaucracy of the state, entrenched themselves in the judiciary, entrenched themselves in the offices of power, so that even if they no longer had the political majority, if they no longer had the ability to elect presidents or parliaments, they still could control the country from the other branches of government. We're seeing something similar happen in America, where you have Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump appoint, I think, over 300 federal judges across the 4 years of his term. The Supreme Court sits to 3 in favor of conservative majority. We're seeing overwhelmingly a pipeline of prosecutors to judge across the country, creating a very prosecutorial bias on the bench nationwide. How do we start to counteract this? I'll start with you, Randy. How do we start to counteract this adherence to the prosecution, adherence to police that many judges have, when there's clearly been an effort to stack the judiciary for the last several years? I've had the Ku Klux Klan on my radio show before, and they said one of their plans has been to start infiltrating judges, to start infiltrating law enforcement, to start infiltrating prosecutors' offices, because that's the best way to maintain control, even if you don't have the population control that you used to have.
Right. There's an absolute, I mean, we should pay attention. We saw that before Trump left office, the mad rush to ensure that they appointed judges across the system to make it where it's almost impossible to get justice for brown and black people. And they have people who are there to serve their political interests, which is not, we're not in mind for that. So we, first of all, have to pay attention and understand the power of judges in this country. I think we pay a lot of attention to our national, elections. We pay attention to the president and vice president, and we don't realize that a lot of the work that affects us day to day and our children and our loved ones is done right there on the local level. So to pay attention, to get out there and vote, to speak up, to look at people's records and see that if they are pro just even people and not pro agenda.
Absolutely. And part of this, I think that what we've realized is that Republican politicians since 2020 have been able to use this hashtag defund the police very effectively to scare even progressive politicians. We saw this here in Georgia, where Brian Kemp started hitting Stacey Abrams with the defund the police mantra. At the same time, the crime was rising, and Stacey Abrams had to respond to a commercial basically reaffirming her support for police. Why do you think it's been so effective for Republicans to scare even progressive politicians by saying they want to defund the police and allow criminals to run wild through the streets? We saw Senator Ron Johnson last week saying that crime was reparations for black people, in so many words. Dr. Ali, why do you think they are so afraid of being labeled as being in favor of defund the police? And should we be, quote unquote, defunding the police and investing in mental health professionals that can address these issues, investing in addiction specialists that can respond to these calls, investing in social services that can reply and not send somebody with a gun, a badge, a stick, and a taser, and a handcuffs to address these issues, instead of somebody who's actually trained to deal with mental health and substance abuse and other issues?
Well, I think because, no shade, but many Democrats don't know how to deal with the issue. They don't know how to counter, and counter means that you're in a defensive position. They don't know how to get in front of these issues, or at least we don't see that happening enough. Here's what I mean. If somebody comes at me talking about, why do you think that it needs to be, changes inside of law enforcement? First thing I'd share with them is that 1,039 people have already been killed by police this year. Yep. We're not at the end of the year yet. So is that something that is okay to happen inside of our country? That's not talking about just the folks that have been shot by police. I'm talking about the folks who have been killed by police. So when you're starting to look at the real numbers that are out there, tying it to the lives, tying it to how kids may no longer have their mother or their father around, or families are now being broken up. Everybody talks about family values. Well, let's stop destroying families, by people using this fatal force that's going on. And that number that I just actually shared with you actually comes from the fatal force report that the Washington Post continues to do. They started tracking to see actually how many people were being murdered by police or killed by police, shot by police each and every year. So we've got to actually bring it back to humanity. We've got to also make sure that folks understand how these sets of actions are actually damaging communities. They're damaging communities from the mental health side, the public health side. They're also damaging communities from the economic side when you are allowed to do these types of things without there being any significant recourse that's going on. So it comes down to Democrats actually being able to anchor it in the reality of what's going on in everyday people's lives.
All right, we're definitely going to keep our eye on this story, but I think we have to realize that these things are not just happening here, but happening internationally. Which brings us to our next story. The Iranian government is in continuing their weeks-long brutal crackdown against protesters in the wake of the murder of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini. Mahsa Amini died in September after being detained by Iran's quote-unquote morality police for incorrectly wearing her hijab and wearing pants, according to the morality police, were too tight. Eyewitnesses say Mansa was beaten unconscious, while state officials claim that she died due to a pre-existing medical condition. If you remember, when George Floyd was killed, they reported it as him dying from a pre-existing medical condition. After being taken to the hospital, her death sparked outrage among young Iranian women previously regarded as uninterested in politics. The protests have continued since Amini's funeral. Violence has spread into the Kurdish areas. This week, the 22-year-old man was killed and more than 120 were injured, where activists clashed with Iranian forces. For the first time, protesters have threatened the oil industry, and the U.S. is expected to follow the EU in the coming days by issuing sanctions against the Iranian regime. So this issue of police brutality and the subjugation of minorities, because remember, in America, minorities go along racial lines. In other countries, they go along ethnic lines. So the Kurds, being the minority ethnic group in Iran, are subjugated in many of the same ways as African Americans are here in this country. And the reason that the mainstream media in America is not reporting on this story is how exactly can you hold Iran to task for what happened to Mahsa Amini when you can't hold the Texas police to task what happened to Pamela Turner, or for what happened to Sandra Bland, or what happened to Breonna Taylor, or what happened to Katherine Johnson. We have to ensure that we are going to, quote unquote, be the hegemonic power of the world, that if we are going to be the police officer for the entire planet, enforcing human rights and human dignity across international borders, we got to clean up our house here at home first. And these protests continue. They are spreading throughout the Middle East and throughout the developing world in solidarity with Miss Amini. And part of this is going to continue going forward. To keep this conversation going, we're joined now by international human rights attorney and Reverend in Baltimore, Maryland, Reverend S. Todd Nury. Reverend Nury, how are you?
Good to be with you, Robert Patillo. I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation in Iran and what is being done to the protester there? Because it is a closed regime. We are not getting reliable media reports out. We're getting something through Telegram and other encrypted sources. But what is the situation there on the ground in Iran?
Well, as you laid out in the intro to the discussion, is really what's going on is an iron-fisted approach to stifle dissent. And in an assault on the human dignity of Miss Amini, we see the continuation of that on behalf of and directed toward those who have come to lift their voices where her voice has now been silenced. Even the reporter who initially released the picture of Miss Amini's parents at the hospital is now in solitary confinement, because in a closed society, the media are tools of the government and the regime. Not processes of the sharing and the dissemination of information. And so when we look at what's going on the ground, one can only suspect, based on what we are able to get out, is the most severe form of human rights abuses and violations that call for the concerted, unified voice of the international community to respond in like manner, to make sure that the persons who are being harmed, denied human dignity and their human rights, even though the Iranian government back in the 1960s and 70s signed on to international treaties protecting civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. So those are the issues that concern us even right now. And I think there's going to be more protests, more dissent, and most likely more violence to come in the next few days.
I find it interesting that even there in Iran, we see people flying the Black Lives Matter flag in a corollary, making the connection between what happened to Mahsa Amini, what happened to Sandra Bland here, what happened to Breonna Taylor here, what happened to Pamela Turner here. How difficult is it for the United States to issue sanctions against the Iranian government and to take them to task, let's say, before the International Court for Human Rights violations, where they can point the finger right back to us and say we haven't cleaned up our own house?
Well, that's part of the responsibility to call out what we see. But as we would often say in the church, it's hard to point out the speck in someone else's eye when you have a plank hanging out of your own. And so I think part of this is to say that we have an obligation not only to address and speak to the concerns in Iran, but continue to do the necessary transformation here so that we're not just speaking to someone else's issues without transforming our own conditions. And so, in your earlier segment, when you were having the discussion with Ben Crump, the push for reform in police and law enforcement, protecting the rights and the erosion of those rights at the hands of a Supreme Court that has ever expanded the ability of the police function of the state to be able to violate human rights, quite honestly, is an issue. Not too long ago, the UN High Commission on Human Rights had an input call from U.S. organizations to speak to the issue of the abuses of police authority in the United States. And in the process of the response, we recognize that the U.S. is itself in violation of of a number of human rights treaties and principles that it often tries to hold other governments accountable to. What that means is this is not an either or moment. This is a both and moment. The government must speak to what's going on in Iran, but must also be very transparent in its own responsible response to its internal issues in the United States. Otherwise, we become public hypocrites to what is going on in the global situation across the country.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned being global hypocrites because it seems that the pervasive nature of white supremacy in American politics has crippled us on the international stage. In China, we mentioned earlier the genocide in the Xinjiang province of the ethnic Uyghurs, who are the Muslim minority population towards the western borders with Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. And when the U.S. tries to call the Chinese out for doing it, they say we're doing nothing different than what you did in Native Americans when you were settling the West in the name of manifest destiny. There's nothing different between us settling the Xinjiang province and y'all settling Texas, for example, or y'all settling California. When it comes to the Ukrainian situation, if you listen to Russian media, they will say they are doing nothing different than the United States did in the Mexican-American War, taking contested territory from a neighbor that is militarily weaker. There's no difference between us taking Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California than them taking Donbass, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Crimea, and Kherson. What does it say about America where because we have not properly atoned for and cleaned up our past, it makes us hypocrites on the international stage?
Well, it says that atonement is still required. It does not give us a pass from the responsibility of being concerned about the rights of our neighbor. But at the same time, we have to recognize that our neighbor is closer to us than the neighbor we're often trying to advocate for. And so it really requires that the dissent, the collective voice of the international outcry continue to be heard so that we recognize across international boundaries that the plight of the people is not as distinct and isolated as we otherwise would think. There are problems in the United States as there are problems in Iran and in other countries. We have this ongoing conversation. And so it becomes the responsibility of those who have voice to challenge the powers that be. And we talked about earlier in your segment what some of those would be. It's not just voting, but showing up at the meetings when the policies are made and the policies are enforced. What do we do when we recognize that there are multiple levels of dissent? There has to be conversation and protest in the street and in the suite, in the boardroom and in the courtroom. This is a litigation and legislation moment, not just a moment of just kind of lifting our voice as part of a passive exercise. We've got to make sure that this is not just a seasonal demonstration of resistance. There has to be support for those who are experiencing the stifling of dissent and the limitation of their voices, to recognize that there are other voices in the choir that are singing with them, and the entire international community, imperfect though it is, must be clear that it speaks to all of the issues and the concerns in countries across the world, and not just those that cannot claim the privilege of being the elite countries with veto power on the Security Council.
Many people have begun to compare the protests we're seeing right now in the wake of the death of Mansa Amini, similar to the Arab Spring that we saw during the Obama administration, which ultimately led to revolutions in Libya and Egypt and throughout the Middle East, the toppling of Mubarak, the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. And some people are speculating that this might be what toppled the Iranian regime. Angry teenage girls throwing their hijabs at officers might be not the ignition point for regime change. Where do you see this going? Where do you see the end point being of these protests? Will it be similar to what we saw in the United States, where we protest for a year in 2020 and ultimately we get no federal legislation, no real federal change out of it? Or do you think this will lead to lasting change in the Iranian regime?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. Either of those could be a potential outcome. The question becomes where do we fit in the process of helping to support the dissent? A lot of folks will have some concern that any engagement from the United States would be a contribution to regime change. And when we look at the geopolitical arena where the United States finds itself in a very tough place, you almost kind of wonder if the other competing interest of the government will cause it to take on a more subtle and nuanced and unhelpful approach to supporting what's going on in the streets of Iran and in other places across the country. We have to be very, very clear that we aren't given the privilege of being selective about where we engage. There are a number of places across the world where there are issues being addressed. One of the first things that we can do in the United States is to make sure we're creating a model and not just coming up with a critique. We cannot continue to be the purveyors of global hypocrisy about the treatment of the least of these in the streets of the country. And until we wrestle with that in terms of how we handle our own politics, how we handle the distribution of resources, how we address the denial of political participation within the borders of the United States, how we treat the migrants who come to our borders, even though we have an international treaty that speaks to how we treat the foreigners within our borders. Those are issues that we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of simply because we can point to someone else who's having problems that we think are worse than our own. The credibility of our governmental structure and the policies that are made here have to be put on full display as a contrast and not just a critique.
You know, I find it interesting the complicity between the political structure here in the United States and the quote unquote independent free press that we have, the fourth estate, as it would be, because we haven't heard a lot about this story in mainstream media here in the U.S. One of the biggest stories internationally, a revolution that might lead to the toppling of the Iranian regime, gets absolutely no play in the evening news here in the United States of America. We hear nothing about it in the midterm elections as people are running and begging for votes with 4 weeks out. Why do you think so little attention is being played to this massive international issue, both in American media and in American politics?
Well, the short answer is that, you know, media is a profit-making venture. There's money attached to it. And so the protest, justice, demands for human rights and human dignity, that's not sexy. And so when we're trying to figure out how we entice corporate dollars to buy commercial time on our airways, we have to figure out how do we draw the base of folks who those clients would be looking to reach by virtue of their commercials. And so I think part of this is recognizing that we must look to not only how we get information, how we disseminate it, and actually the free press and social media is one of the ways that I think we force the hand of broadcast media outlets that often claim their own supremacy to force them to be more inclusive in terms of how they speak to the issues that matter across the world.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this on my radio show Sunday that if you compare all the human rights abuses going around the world right now, whether it's Iran or if it's China or if it's Myanmar, if it's what's going on currently in Haiti with the gangs that are running the streets there, many of the things that are happening with the FARC in Colombia, a massive human rights concern. If you compare that to the coverage that Kanye West has gotten in the last week for sending out a tweet, you will see that our press is no longer press. It is simply the tabloids with nice suits on. That being said, I think that part of the reason our politicians aren't talking about this and other human rights abuses is because then it opens it up to asking them the question, well, what are you going to do about the human rights abuses here? What are you going to do about the United States having one of the largest prison populations on earth? We criticized Russia for holding Brittany Griner when marijuana is still a felony here in America, despite Joe Biden's executive order this week. How can we criticize Iran and their morality police for killing a minority woman when we have minority women killed by police here? How can we, with 4 weeks until the midterms, turn the issue of human rights, both domestically and abroad, into a campaign year issue when it seems that neither party has an appetite really to address it?
That's a great question. I think we have to remember what elections are about. They're about policies, not simply personalities. And if the people's agenda is not forefront of any discussion about who wants to take on a position of service to the needs of their constituents, then what we've done is we've diminished the value of what we lift up as often a model form of government. And so if we're going to be a republic that is a democratic form of practice where the voices of the people help to establish what are going to be the principles that guide our interactions in society, then we have to make sure that it starts with a conversation amongst the people. We often talk about government of, for, and by the people. That means the people's agenda, not just the party's agenda, has to be part of that conversation. And whichever party speaks to the people's agenda, that is the party that the people should support. But the people have to be clear on what their demands are. It is not that we create proxies to say for us what our needs and demands ought to be. It is that we create representatives of our collective interests and to make sure that they bring back at all levels, not just federal, but local and state. There are a lot of problems that get right down to Main Street and not just what's happening on K Street in DC. We have to make sure that we continue to make the righteous demands that the people's agenda, and the people's agenda only, is the one that is advanced to make sure that we are forming a more perfect union.
I think that also the voters have a responsibility. Don't just let these folks come to you and promise you a fish fry and promise you these empty drinks. Somebody go ask Herschel Walker, what are your views on international human rights in Iran? I just want to see what the answer is. Just do that for me, somebody, get it on video, send it to me. Thank you so much, Reverend S. Todd Nury, Praxis Strategies, for joining us today to talk about the very important issues. Please join us again in the future because we need your expertise. Thank you, Reverend Nury.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Roland Martin Unfiltered will be right back after this break. You're watching the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Libraries empower the community with education. Liberia Economic Development Initiative, LEDI, is hosting the International Life Changers Awards and Liberia's bicentennial to celebrate LEDI building the country's first modern public library and technology center. Join event host Roland Martin. Our honorees, Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant, Zernona Clayton, Thomas Dorch Jr., Dana Lupton, Dr. Tammy Graysteele, on October 29th at the CNN Center, Atlanta. There are no public libraries in Liberia, but together we can change that. Get tickets at ledinow.org.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
You know what's on the ballot. It's not just legislation and policies we believe in. It's democracy. Our democracy. There's a choice on the ballot between freedom and fear, between cruelty and compassion, between chaos and community, between voting or violence, and the end of rights generations have fought for. The extremists have a plan, a roadmap for a nation where your voice is silenced and your vote is a memory, where they count their votes and cast ours aside. That's why this year, this fight, this vote is so important. Register, engage, volunteer, fight back against the disinformation and despair, and most of all, vote, because your vote is all that stands between our future and theirs.
hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance.
We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Something crazy, but I don't know what to do. I'd rather just sit here.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph, and you are watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered. I mean, could it be any other way? Really? It's Roland Martin.
And welcome back. Warden Holding Tanzania Limited. Warden Holding Tanzania Limited is making strides in creating economic opportunities in Africa. The company is cultivating ways to sustain transformative growth and improving living conditions. Joining me now from New Orleans, Louisiana, are the CEO and CFO of Ward Holdings, Lloyd D. Ward and Martin Johnson, explaining how they've created over 2 million good-paying jobs in Tanzania. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start with you, Ward, Mr. Ward. Tell us why Tanzania and what made you want to work on economic development there? Mr. Ward, can you hear me? Oh, I'll go to Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, there we go. Mr. Johnson, tell us a little bit about the company and what made you decide that Tanzania was where you wanted to start working on economic development.
Thank you for the question again. Thank you for having us. We formed our company in 2018 with plans to build bridges between the United States, Africa, China, India, and the rest of the world. And because of my partner's background, Lloyd is actually by way of background, spent the first 17 years of his career with Procter & Gamble. Then he became a vice president and general manager, and then vice president of PepsiCo. And then he was president of Frito-Lay. I'll bring up those things so I could make you aware he's an expert in consumer products. Then after Frito-Lay, he headed the United States Olympic Committee. So of the 200 plus countries in the world, he's been to over 100 of them. After the Olympics, Lloyd, he's actually the first African-American to be chairman and CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He was chairman and CEO of Maytag, and during the time that he was working his way up the ladder at Maytag, he closed the deal with the largest washing machine dealer in China, Ranchita. And after that, he was appointed to the Beijing Economic Advisory Council. I wanted you to be aware of those things because those things are what led our company to getting engaged in China when we first formed it. It was during the trade war between the U.S. and China, during former President Trump's administration. And so we wanted to build bridges between the U.S., China, Africa, and the rest of the world. But we went to China specifically because Lloyd had a background there. When we got to China, our client, Huabin Province, they asked us to assist them with building an increase in trade and commerce between their province and Africa. And so we went to Tanzania because we had relationships that date back almost 10 years in Tanzania. So we've been on the ground almost 3 years now. And we were asked by the Tanzanian government and leadership of the country to assist them with industrialization of their agriculture sector, and specifically to start with cashew nuts. By way of background, I have over 30 years in the banking industry. I met my business partner, Lloyd, towards the end of my banking career while I was president of Regions Bank. And so since that time, we've worked on many things together. And again, we're in Tanzania, been on the ground about almost 3 years.
And I think we do have Mr. Ward with us now. Mr. Ward, can you tell us a little bit about this connection with China? You know, I think we all know about the Belt and Road Initiative, $5 trillion being invested in infrastructure projects throughout the developing world by the Chinese government, much to the consternation of the U.S. During the same time that America was doing America First and protectionism, China was spreading their influence around the globe. Talk a little bit about this partnership and working with the Chinese and with the Tanzania government to work on the industrialization of that nation.
Well, and thank you for having Martin and I on your show today, and we look forward to sharing whatever we can. Here's a situation. Those are two different things. My association with China has been extensive, and it started in 1996, and I watched China industrialize from a state that's less developed than Africa is today to one of the economic powerhouses of the world. I witnessed that. I participated in it. I'm still a member of the Beijing Economic Development
Say that again, please.
I'm still involved with China, but less so. I am a member of the Beijing Economic Development Council even today. And so that was then, this is now. I'm now involved with Africa. And I've committed myself to that for the rest of my life. China is advancing a One Belt, One Road initiative. It is for them to develop and be a global power from now until the end of time. The great abundance on earth, the greatest abundance on earth is by God's design in Africa. It's the most resource abundant land on earth. The world knows it. China knows it. And so their One Belt, One Road is a modern Silk Road, which existed back in ancient times, but they're modernizing it today. And it is their way. It is not our way. Our way is to participate with our brothers and sisters in the motherland, in Swahili called Kaka, brother, Dada, sister, to help realize God's provision and promise to Africa and its inhabitants. God would not have made Africa the most resource abundant land on earth and expected scarcity for its inhabitants. And we are honored to be a part of the new way and the new day in Africa.
And so with that, we've seen China over the course of the last 40 years lift some 800 million people out of poverty. As you said, going from a quote-unquote developing nation. I remember as a child, they would say, eat all your food, they're starving children in China, now to being the second largest economy by GDP in the world. What lessons from them can we learn and then transport to the African continent to help see that same level of development there? As we saw in China in the latter half of the last century?
Industrialization matters. So industrialization means taking something of one value, processing it to something of a higher value. And as long as the higher value is greater than the cost of processing, you make a profit. And so you're right. If you were to characterize the global GDP, gross domestic product, as $1 US, and it's about $94 trillion, the global GDP, gross domestic product. If you're to characterize it as $1 US, the US would be 26 cents, China 20 cents, Japan 5 cents, Germany 4 cents, India 3.6 cents, the UK 3.4 cents, France 2.9 cents, and Africa, all 54 countries of Africa, would represent only 2.8 cents of the global economy, and Africa has all the resources. How can 54 countries in Africa be less than the GDP of France? It makes no sense, and it is a great injustice. And it is time for a new day in a new way. I'll briefly tell you how that occurs. Africa today sells all of their valuable resources, whether they be their crude oil or their precious metals from their mines or what they harvest in their fields as agricultural crops. They sell them at the lowest economic value in the global supply chain because that was the way colonialism worked. And they are still in the post-colonial era. Only 40 to 60 years has Africa been free of colonial rule. And Africa still supplies the world with commodities and raw materials that run modern society and get the least amount of economic benefit. We're helping to change that.
Now, Mr. Johnson, earlier you mentioned that you guys are starting with cashew nuts. Now, cashew harvesting is one of the most dangerous and labor-intensive crops on earth. Can you talk a little bit about how cashews play into the industrialization of Tanzania?
Currently, they harvest about 250,000 metric tons annually. And Africa, by the way, of the cashew nuts in the world, 60% of the cashew nuts in the world are grown and harvested in Africa. So that contributes $250 million to the Tanzanian gross national product. But 90% of what they grow and harvest is sold at an auction to Vietnam, India, and Brazil. And so we believe that with what we're doing, we know that with what we're doing, we're going to create millions of jobs. In fact, over the next 10 years, we plan to work with Tanzania and the other 8 largest cashew nut producing countries. We plan to create 40 million jobs through industrialization and processing and packaging all of the cashew nuts in the country.
Absolutely. And Mr. Ward, on that point, will your expertise in managing large corporations, large enterprises, everything from the Olympics down to Maytag, how can your expertise help them to organize the natural resources, the human capital, the land, the logistics that they have into getting the maximum profit so they can operate in direct competition with the international community?
Well, you know, God has prepared me and our team for this moment in time. We've been able to see the way the global markets work. We are experts in consumer packaged goods and industrial products. We understand and are connected to the global supply chain. We know how to take the economic value of a raw material and create vast wealth and income from it. And so we're bringing this because we're standing on the shoulders of our forefathers and foremothers that were taken forcibly away from Africa, our motherland. And 300, 400 years later, we get to go back with the benefit of their suffering and their servitude. This is kingdom. It is an opportunity for us to make a difference in the trajectory of the world forever. We know how to do this. Last year, African Americans spent $1.6 trillion on consumer spending. That's 60% of the GDP of all of Africa, all 54 countries. Did many of us think about how that might contribute to the advancement of Africa? When we talk to the Tanzanian Association of Tour Operators, and there's roughly 1 million visitors that come to Tanzania every year to see the Serengeti, to see Mount Kilimanjaro, Arusha, Zanzibar, these wonderful Lake Victoria, these wonderful places in the world. In our motherland, less than 2% of those that come to Tanzania on an annual basis are African American. You see, we have been disassociated as the diaspora with our motherland, and it is time for us to reconnect.
And with that, do you have any trepidation with the kind of the connection through financing with Beijing, given the current economic issues that are happening there? You have everything from the Evergrande crisis to the mortgage foreclosure crisis happening in China. Does that in any way affect the plans to create this bridge between China, the African continent, and markets here in the United States and Europe?
Yeah, I don't, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric around China and the financial condition in China. That doesn't have a direct effect on the financial situation in Africa. Africa has its own challenges independent of the rest of the world in this way. If money seeks the highest return at the lowest risk, and that's generally what money does in the capital markets, you want the highest return with the lowest risk. Africa has, by all accounts, the highest opportunity in the world. No place on earth has more opportunity than Africa. And yet Africa and its entrepreneurs face the highest cost of capital, that means the interest rate to use capital, and the least access to capital. For example, if you're an entrepreneur in Tanzania, you pay 16 to 21% for working capital and 12 to 30% for investment capital. That occurred before China's difficulties, and it's occurring after China's difficulties. You see, Africa has been marginalized in the global economy because those that benefit from Africa being exploited propagate that Africa is unruly, unsafe, not a part of the world, not a part of the economic fabric, and they discount Africa so that they continue the ways of exploitation. We've been there, we know different, and we're going to showcase Africa to the world to the extent God allows us to, in a way that represents Africa as God would have it.
Absolutely. Mr. Johnson, what role do African Americans play in helping to support the endeavor that you're working on? As was mentioned, we've spent a lot of money on entertainment and tourism all around the Caribbean and Central and South America on vacation and so on. What can we do to get more African Americans investing their money, spending their money, partnering with businesses that are located on the African continent?
Well, I'd like to do a confession to you and to your listeners. I don't believe there's anyone in the world more wrong about Africa than me, and I've been president of a bank in the U.S. I had customers who would go over for business reasons to Africa. I had customers who went over for vacations, safaris, and the like. But I was brainwashed by America, and most of us were. Poverty, corruption, and all of the negative things that they told us about our motherland. What changed it for me was I flew over from Alexandria, Louisiana to Atlanta, Georgia in 2014, and then from Atlanta, Georgia to Paris, France. And then I got on Kenya Airways, and the pilot looked like you, and the co-pilot looked like you. And then when I got to Tanzania, everyone working in the airport looked like us. And then from the bottom of the bank to the top of the bank, us. From the bottom of the government to the top of the government, they looked like us. And the last day that I was there in 2014, I attended an event for PAT, Pediatric Association of Tanzania. The master of ceremony at that event was the fourth president of Tanzania, President Kikwete. And Lloyd and I just saw him at an Unstoppable Africa Summit in New York a couple of weeks ago. But that night, he was the master of ceremony, and they raised $750,000 US that night to improve health outcomes for newborn children. And I serve on a hospital board for Christus Health in Louisiana. And that year we raised about $500,000. So I knew the significance of the funds that he raised that night to purchase new equipment and supplies and other things to help improve those health outcomes. As impressed as I was with him being there, his two predecessors who had both served 2 5-year terms, so 20 years between them, and President Kikwete was in the second of his second. He was in the second of his 5-year terms, so almost 30 years of commitment to improving health outcomes. Lloyd and I, we believe that our brothers and sisters in the motherland have been waiting on those of us who've been blessed with gifts and talents from above, from God, to come back and help them. And again, please understand what we're doing in Tanzania. We're not creating anything new. We are simply taking the best global practices and certainly the skills and the gifts and talents that we know and that we have, and utilizing them to help our brothers and sisters. So in addition to those jobs that we plan to create in the motherland, we plan to utilize others from the U.S., our friends and family who are in our network, and those who we're going to benefit from, your listeners, we're going to take the best of America back to our motherland and help our brothers and sisters.
And Mr. Ward, Mr. Ward, I was going to ask you the same question, so go ahead.
Yeah, in Africa, we are celebrated. In America, in many ways, we're tolerated. It's a different feel, a different essence. The people in Africa are so warm and giving and inviting. They say, Karibu, Karibu Sana, welcome, you're most welcome. And so economic development is a part of the fabric of moving to kingdom. And we have three basic ways that we advance global economic development. One is know and serve your market. Second is follow the money. And third is act in unity. And we know and serve the market. The U.S. is the largest importing market in the world, second largest consumption behind India. India has 1.1 billion people. And so we are the second most important market in the world as it relates to cashews. And we are opening up direct trade from the rich and fertile soils of Tanzania directly to the USA. No brokers, dealers, handlers, traders, none of that at all. None of that nonsense. In the US, we buy 80% of our ginger from China, and China buys the majority of their ginger from Africa. Go figure. Nigeria still sells crude oil to UK and other European countries and buy back refined oil at 10, 20 times the economic value. Africa has 60% of the arable land. That's land that you can grow agricultural crops on, and Africa is still a net importer of food. Africa is the most resource-abundant land on earth, and yet 40% of its inhabitants live in poverty as measured by global economic standards. These are the great injustices that we have been called to help lead our brothers and sisters to the promise of their land and a better day for their future.
All right, I want to bring my other panel in to see if they have questions, because this is absolutely outstanding information. I think that we need to proliferate. Dr. Ali, do you have a question for the panel?
Yes, I do. This can be for Mr. Ward. I've been in about 60 countries now, so I haven't caught up with you yet, but I'm curious, looking a decade ahead, what will be the significant differences that will be in Tanzania? And hopefully, what will be the lessons learned both from brothers and sisters here and other countries, surrounding Tanzania?
Yes, what a wonderful question. Thank you, Dr. Ali. So I think here's what we are advancing, 2020. In 20 years, that Africa be 20% of the global GDP. China did it. I witnessed it. And remember now, Africa has the abundance of resources. So one thing is that we would be very different. Africa would have a voice in global economic enterprise, be known and respected in global commerce. That's one thing. The other thing is that Africa, which is ghosted today, when I mean ghosted, let's take cashew nuts. 60% of the world's cashew nuts are grown and harvested in Africa, but no one knows. The best cashew nuts in the world are grown in Africa, Tanzania being among those, and we're bringing Tanzania cashew nuts we branded it called Tanzanuts, N-U-T-Z, not S, not N-U-T-S, Tanzanuts, to the U.S. and global market. Go to tanzanuts.com, TANZNUTZ.com. And so we are doing that with an event that we call Tanza Fest. It will occur in November 4th through 6th in New Orleans, the great city of New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. New Orleans is one of the most African-centric cities in the world. And it is in Congo Square that we will have the celebration. This is historic. And so what will happen is that Africa will become a part of the global discourse. Africa will have a voice in the world. And we'll have a voice because just with Tanza nuts alone, we will have hundreds of millions of packages on U.S. shelves and through e-commerce and consumers' pantries and in consumption. And every time you open and enjoy the best cashew nuts in the world, you'll have an experience with Africa. And you'll know Africa is a part of the global fabric. That will change. Africa will be known in the world, valued in the world, and the world will be a better place for it.
Robin, do you have a question for our guest?
I was just going to say that it feels like such a blessing to hear you talk about the beauty and the resources found in Africa. When I first went to my first country in Africa, I realized I've been lied to my entire life about where I am from and where my people are from. So I'm so grateful to hear you also espouse the same. We've talked a lot about how our resources have been taken from Africa and now that you are going to ensure that that doesn't happen so much. What is the reaction you're getting from the other countries that have benefited from taking our resources at very low prices and making so much money from them? I would assume that they're not quite so excited of the work that you're doing.
What a wonderful question. I'll answer this. Maybe Martin has a point of view, but I'll say this, that we are walking in a pathway that we call kingdom. And as a result, what most people would see as conflict and competition, we don't. So we knew that we would affect certain members that are participating now in a different approach to from what we advocate. And as we will work to change it, that it might disrupt what they do. What we did from day one, this is going to be hard to believe, we went and talked to them directly. We showed them what we saw as the future for Africa. We showed them that from our point of view, it was undeniable. It will happen. It has to happen. We showed them the economics of it. We showed them the great economic benefits. By the way, they're not benefiting at the level that they can benefit because it's broken up into pieces and parts, the current supply chain. So everybody gets a little piece here, a little more piece there, a little more, and it goes through all these different steps. Well, we're changing that. We're eliminating all that non-value added activity, all those steps, and we're going directly from the rich and fertile soils of Africa into the global market. We asked them to join us. We showed them the way forward. And we are getting some areas of cooperation. This is a movement that's very different than anything I've ever done. It is bigger than us. And I believe it is divine. I think we're on a divine mission.
What kind of cooperation, if any, are you having with the government there in Tanzania? I think what we saw in Middle Eastern countries over the course of the last decade or so was massive subsidies for tourism, for infrastructure, for airline tickets, for example, to bring more Americans to those countries. At one point in time, you could get plane tickets from Atlanta to Dubai for $300 round trip. Are you seeing any efforts of that nature that from the government to help attract more Americans to come visit there, and particularly to market towards African Americans to return home?
Well, I'll take that. We actually are seeing some activity. In fact, a friend of mine just sent me a text about direct flights from Dallas, Texas to Tanzania. And so we are connected all the way up to the president's office in Tanzania. Most recently, she kicked off a royal tour of her country, and we were invited to one of we attended the one that was in New York. We were invited to the one in Los Angeles, but she came over to tell everyone in America about all of the great things going on in Tanzania. Tanzania, for those of you who don't know, they've had a peaceful transition of power since they gained their independence in 1961, all the way now to their sixth president. On March 17, 2021, the fifth president, John Magufuli, died in office, and 2 days later, they swore in their first female president, President Samia, and they didn't have an insurrection. So in a lot of ways, they're a lot more stable than we are. But getting back to our connections, we're connected all the way up to her office. We were invited when she had an economic roundtable discussion at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., and the Minister of Agriculture, when he found out about our platform, market-driven industrialization, and the Tanzanite brand that Lloyd just mentioned to you, He has not only endorsed our brand as the brand for Tanzania, they've been trying to get cashew nuts into the U.S. market for almost 40 years, and we figured it out in less than 6 months. And so they're very excited about what we're doing. We have Tanzanians who live in Houston and other parts of the U.S. who are just excited that they're going to have cashew nuts coming from their homeland and our motherland into the U.S. market. But again, we are connected all the way up to the president's office, the Minister of Agriculture, the Ministers of Industry and Trade, the key business leaders. In fact, one of the things that we did during our first year over there, we went to the Tanzania Private Sector Foundation, and the gentleman who was running that organization at the time, Godfrey Sembe, he was the chief executive officer for over 10 years of that organization. Not only did he embrace what we're doing, but when he retired, of all the companies that recruited him to work for them, he decided to join our efforts. He was most excited about Lloyd coming over with his background and all of the things that he knows about industrialization. And certainly, I've known Godfrey for almost 10 years, so he knows me very well. And so we're excited about the relationships that we have there, and though we are benefiting from those as a company, and that's why we know when we come over to talk to you and many others in the U.S. about what we're doing, they're jumping on board with our efforts. We have a buyer in Elizabeth, New Jersey, the Gallup Global Group. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they buy cashew nuts from Vietnam, India, and Brazil, all over the world. But they wanted a direct relationship with our company and have decided that they would be our importer of record and want to work with us to buy directly from us in other countries that we plan to do business with, in Africa.
Well, on top of that, if you don't mind, I've actually moved to Tanzania. I have working on getting dual residency. I have a nice villa on the Indian Ocean. But let me encourage all of us from the diaspora. And by the way, the diaspora is all humankind, because God planted the seed of humankind in Ngorongoro, Tanzania. And so white, black, brown, red, yellow, we're all part of the diaspora. But the most direct diaspora is we African Americans, we Black Americans. And I will tell you this, $1 US is worth 2,300 Tanzanian shillings. You want your money to go a long way? Come to Africa. For the next 5 years, the arbitrage between US dollars and African currency will be favorable for all of you that decide to visit and have a second home or more.
Well, we really want.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to say we really want to thank you for all this information. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to support you with Tanzanuts. I'm looking up flights right now. Soon as the things drop in a reasonable range for my income, I'll be over there to visit. I want to thank you both so much for joining us, providing us this information. Lloyd Ward and also Martin Johnson, outstanding the work that you're doing. We thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll be back after the break watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no
punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland. Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hi, I'm BB Winans.
Hi, I'm Kim Burrell.
Hi, I'm Carl Payne.
Hey, everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble.
Welcome back. 17-year-old Christopher Bollinger made history by becoming the youngest licensed pilot in United States history. He completed an Air Force Junior ROTC Flight Academy program in August. Christopher beat out thousands of applicants to take the 8-week program over the summer. Christopher Bollinger joins us now from Washington, D.C. Christopher, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing outstanding. I'm low-key jealous of you because I wanted to be the youngest licensed Black pilot when I was a teenager, and I'm only like 20-something years late from that. Tell us about what got you interested in flight and what got you into this program to be the youngest licensed Black pilot in the country.
Oh, man. So, I mean, I've always loved heights. You know, me and my family used to go to amusement parks, Hershey Park, all the time as a kid. And I just always loved the roller coasters going super fast and super high. And I think, you know, when my mom used to take us on trips, I'd look inside the plane and I'd see the pilots in the cockpit, and I was like, wow, what are they doing, you know? And being up there that high always seemed so cool to me. And so, you know, I finally followed through when I applied for something called the Aim High Flight Academy, which is a 3-week program which aims to get you to solo. But from that application, I got sent to a different pool of cadets to go to this 8-week program, which is what gets you the license. So I took a test at the end of the 8 weeks and I got my license. So yeah, it was really cool. Really, really fun, cool experience, and pretty challenging too.
Absolutely. Now, what did your parents say when you told them at your age that you wanted to get your pilot's license? Was there any pushback? You know, I think I had this conversation in the 90s with my parents, and they looked at me like I was crazy. So kind of talk about your family support behind this, how important that was to getting this achievement.
Yeah, no, I have complete support, especially from my mom. You know, as soon as I told her, she was looking through her phone, seeing who she knew that was a pilot, and she actually got me into, found this camp called, it's an OBAP camp. It means Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. And what they do is they take a group of kids and they show them around different fields of aviation. So we went to airports, control towers. We talked to pilots in the military, and that's really what got me started into, okay, I want to be in aviation, but it showed me like different parts of aviation and especially the military route, because that's what I want to do now. And so that program introduced me to military pilots. And so, yeah, I had complete support from my mom, and without her, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So all thanks to her.
Absolutely. And what are some of the things you did to prepare for this? You know, I think a lot of people criticize Gen Z and Gen Alpha for being on video games and stuff all the time. But did you play games like Flight Simulator and some of the other piloting games? Did those help you prepare for taking the actual exams?
I think so. As a kid, that's what got me into flying. But from the actual exams, we did use flight simulators. However, those are very different from like using an Xbox. Like we actually had like a full cockpit in a room, which acted as a flight simulator. So that helped. But I'd say using like gaming consoles, that just helped my passion. That definitely helped spark my passion for aviation and got me interested into it. So without that, I don't think I'd love it as much as I do right now.
All right, and for people your age and younger who may have thought briefly about this but haven't pursued it, what advice would you give them on actually actualizing some of their interests and some of their passions and turning into actual action as you did to get your actual license, become one of the youngest licensed or the youngest licensed Black pilot in the country, to be on this path to the Air Force? What advice would you give them for putting in the work it takes to get where you are currently?
Right. I'd say the biggest thing is to chase all the opportunities that you can get and to look for all the opportunities, because without, me applying to the Aim High Flight Academy, I never would have had the chance to actually been sent to this 8-week program out in Washington State where I was for the summer. So I think just for anybody who wants to pursue aviation, if you don't know anybody, I promise you there are groups online that talk about aviation. My mom is actually in a Facebook group called Raising Aviation Teens, and in there she's heard about a bunch of different programs, a lot of advice she's been sent. And so I think just, look anywhere you can and chase all opportunities, because you never know what's going to come out of it. And I certainly never thought I'd be getting a pilot's license at this age. So please chase any opportunity you can get. Talk to anybody that you know is a pilot, or just reach out and see who wants, because people are there to help you. People want to help you and they want to see you succeed, especially if you have these dreams at a young age. So I strongly suggest that you reach out to people and look for any opportunities that you can get.
I got a nephew a couple years younger than me who lives in Washington State, and you just put a huge burden on his back. Dominique, you hear that? Dominique, I know you're watching. You got to be with me right here. We got connect y'all. Real quick, what's your favorite plane? What do you want to fly when you're in the Air Force?
Oh, when I'm in the Air Force, got to be the F-35s. I mean, those things go super fast and they're super stealthy and can do a bunch of different maneuvers. And it's got to be, I'll be fine with any fighter jet, to be honest, but F-35's got to be my number one.
You got to get on that F-22. The F-35 doesn't have thrust vectoring. The F-22 goes, Mach 2.7? The F-35 tops out at Mach 1.6. Come on, you got to be a 22 pilot, man.
F-35 is so stealthy and it looks so good, but they all look good. They all look good.
Absolutely. Is there any last words of advice you would give to young people? Because I think it's very important we put positive images of young Black men out here in the media. And if you have social media that you want people to follow or anything that you want to promote, feel free to drop that information out. Or even if it's a gamer tag, if you're streaming on Twitch, you want people to follow you, go ahead and plug away.
Yeah, I just want to tell everybody that's listening, that I think that people want to help you, and I suggest that everybody just stays engaged to what they want to do, because if you push for your dreams, I promise it will work out, and I promise you can reach it if you try your hardest. So that's what advice I have to give. And I also want to say, give back to people. If you're in a position like I am, I want to be able to inspire kids that want to be in aviation too. So if you are in a position like me or anything, please look to give back. And also, I say, just know that there are people like you out there. Like, there are kids, whether you know it or not. That's a big part of why I wanted to, get my story out there, because not a lot of kids, that look like me have their pilot's license. And so I want to inspire other kids and let them know that their dreams can be reached if they work for it. And also, you guys can follow me on Instagram at Christopher.Ballinger. That's just my name with a dot in the middle. That's on Instagram. So yeah, thank you for having me on the show. It was great.
Well, I'm gonna bring in the panel to ask you a couple questions, guys. I think we all want to give support. And it's interesting you said, because when I was literally your age, I was obsessed with the SR-71 Blackbird, like Kelly Johnson, the Skunk Works. I just knew I was going to be a Blackbird pilot, and my parents sent me to law school. So having that family support, I definitely understand. I think it's great. Dr. Ali, did you have anything you wanted to question, or anything you wanted to say to Christopher?
Christopher, I'm so proud of you. It's such an honor and a blessing to be able to hold space with you. In my family, we had the first African-American female pilot at United Airlines. So I understand, sort of the joy that comes with that. Let me just ask, the first time that you went up, share with folks that feeling that you had the first time that you were up in the air.
Yeah, so I remember the first time I was actually with my instructor in the plane, looking down that runway, I was like, wow, this thing is long. Are we really going to go down this? And then when I put in the throttle to actually go forward, it was fast, it was quick, and we were going. It just flashed before me. I couldn't believe any of it was real. And when you're actually up there, it's a surreal feeling that you never thought before, especially when you are actually in control of the plane, flying it yourself. It's nothing like I could have imagined. And I think it's really cool how the more you do it, the more you get comfortable in the plane. And when I was in week 5 of my program, I felt so comfortable and so aware of everything. It was like second nature to me. And so it was just a great, great experience all around. I had a great time.
Robin, did you have a question for Christopher? Randy, sorry.
No problem. I've been called worse. Christopher, I'm just so incredibly proud of you. You clearly have a praying mother, because just watching you in that airplane made my heart just jump. What was the moment, if there was one, that you felt like, I cannot do this? And what got you through that moment?
Right. So I think that moment was, it was 8 weeks. So probably in the middle of it, I was getting tired. We were learning new things every day. Work was getting harder. The stress on top of having to learn everything and make sure you're on top of your flying. It's a lot. It was really a lot. And so it was hard to find ways to get through it. But I think the friends that I made at the academy, they pushed me through. I saw them, they were doing the same thing as me. They were going through these hard times. But when I saw them working, it inspired me to work. And I was able to rely on them for helping with studying with my instructors. And so I think it was just the community around me that really, really helped me succeed. And my mom, of course, too.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. And I think that this is absolutely outstanding and crucial information that people need to know and understand to get us outside of the box, because I think particularly as young African-American males, we kind of get stuck into a box. Are you going to be a rapper? You're going to be an athlete? You're going to be an entertainer? But very often your inspiration becomes your aspiration. And when they see people who look like them, with hair like them, with skin like them, aspiring to be a pilot and taking on some of the responsibilities, you never know what person that breaks down a door for, and then that inspired to take that next step. So hopefully the next time we do this, we'll have a whole little tribe of you right behind you doing the same thing. It's absolutely an inspiration, everything that you've done, and we really do appreciate it. We're going to keep in touch, so we make sure that we watch the progress and that everybody can see all the great things that you're doing. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for all the things that you've done.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks. We're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to the Black-owned sliced bread company about how they have revolutionized the industry. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be back after the break.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
You know what's on the ballot. It's not just legislation and policies we believe in. It's democracy. Our democracy. There's a choice on the ballot between freedom and fear, between cruelty and compassion, between chaos and community, between voting or violence, and the end of rights generations have fought for. The extremists have a plan, a roadmap for a nation where your voice is silenced and your vote is a memory, where they count their votes and cast ours aside. That's why this year, this fight, this vote is so important. Register, engage, volunteer, fight back against the disinformation and despair, and most of all, vote, because your vote is all that stands between our future and theirs.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
What's up, y'all? I'm Will Packer.
I'm Chrisette Michelle.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
We're now talking about the Black Bread Company that is making waves and revolutionizing the industry. Take a trip to your grocery store searching for Black-owned bread companies, and you come up empty-handed. This sparked the beginnings of the Black Bread Company. Joining us is Charles Alexander, Mark Edmonds, Jamel Lewis, and they have made history by launching the U.S. first ever Black-owned sliced bread company. Right here we have Jamel Lewis, co-founder, president of the Black Bread Company, joining us from Chicago. So, Mr. Lewis, talk a little bit about bread and what made you get into the idea of not just making bread, but actually making bread.
Yeah, great to be on here. We are the Black Bread Company, the first African-American-owned gourmet sliced bread company here that we know of course. It started back in 2020. Our founder and CEO, Mark Edmond, went into the grocery store originally during the pandemic, during the time of civil unrest. A lot of things were going on in the country, of course, as you can imagine. He went to the grocery store. He was looking to support African-American-owned products. His wife sent him in the store the list. And at the top of the list, the first thing on the list was bread. He began Googling, looking to see which companies were African-American owned or had African-American or minority executives. He was just looking to support, that was his protest, if you will. He realized after about 45 minutes that a company of his kind did not exist. So he got myself on the line. He called our other friend, Charles. We all grew up together on the south side of Chicago. And we decided, instead of, voicing our opinions on social media or going and just being frustrated and not necessarily, taking action, we decided, you know what, let's be the change that we wanted to see. Let's be and present the representation that we wanted to see on the shelves for our people, and actually just be the start, be the bridge for that, that type of situation for our people. So the Black Bread Co. was born at that time.
Now, you have the official Chicago October outfit on, because when I used to live in Chicago, a hoodie and a fitted is pretty much what you wear from October until March or April. Right. So what made y'all get into artisanal bread, and how have you found a market within the Black community for, not Wonder Bread, not just a regular sliced bread, but actual artisanal bread, what they would call fancy bread in many neighborhoods? Right.
You know what it is for us? We pride ourselves on quality and operating in excellence. We know that our people, people of color, we just are a very unique, interesting, diverse group of people. So we just knew that in terms of what we wanted to present would always be the best and highest of quality, even just to educate ourselves and educate people that look like us, just on being the best and having high quality and high standards for ourselves. A lot of times, out of necessity, we've gone for the bottom of the barrel, if you will. I've gone for the things that we've had to do, just to kind of make ends meet, so to speak. So we actually wanted to challenge ourselves and just show our people that we know we can be the best. We know we can compete in any space and in the industry. So we wanted to just make sure that we just took pride in having the best, highest quality in all of our products that we could have. So that's one thing that we want people to know, to expect from our brand. Black Bread Co. represents excellence and being the best of the best and the best that we can be at all times.
Absolutely. You guys have partnered with Roland and Roland Martin Unfiltered to offer a discount for people ordering the bread. Can you talk a little about that discount code for people who want to get involved and be able to support you directly? Without a doubt. You can visit blackbreadco.com. We ship nationwide, even internationally, depending on where you are. And there is indeed a 20% off unfiltered code. If you go on there, just type in unfiltered 20 and you'll save 20% off your next purchase. So you can experience our products, and we hope you enjoy. Of course, our company has been valued at over $51 million. We just closed out a $1 million
campaign, equity campaign, crowdfunding, allowing, just the people to come along and join us on our mission of ownership and understanding the power of equity and us coming together and just learning and growing together. So blackbreadco.com, you can take advantage of that sale and also be on the lookout. We got a lot of great things and great opportunities for you to support and be a part and even own a portion and a stake in a company just like this, the Black Bread Company.
Now, I'm a bit of a bread snob myself. Back in college, I had a job working at the Buckhead Bread Company. This is no lie, I was a sophomore in college. And so we were worked at the bakery getting rich white folks their bread. And it was all going well until my second day on the job when this rich white lady came in holding a little puppy. And she said, "Excuse me, boy, can you give me some pumpernickel?" And so I got fired that day. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the varieties of breads and what you're doing to introduce many people in the African American community to maybe some of the varieties that are out there that they might not be familiar with?
Sure. And I want to say this even out the gate. We don't even want to just specialize in bread. You know what I mean? There are so many items across the grocery stores, across the grocery chains that we aren't participating in. So, of course, we do have our standard premium honey wheat bread, our premium white bread. We have hot dog, hamburger buns. We have bagels, premium quality bagels straight from New York that we've formulated recipes for that are coming soon. Bagels, English muffins, so many various products, jams, mustard, so many things that we're working toward to be able to get to the people. We actually just entered into a partnership with Target brand. So what is it? May 2023 will be available in Target. So many great things to come, so many great products coming. And we really just want people to have the opportunity to be a part of this brand, and hopefully we can continue on in greatness and excellence and do something special for the world to see.
All right, I'm going to pull my panel and ask a couple questions. Dr. Ali, you have any questions regarding our brothers here who are making bread while making bread?
Oh, most definitely. Well, congratulations to the Black Bread Company. I love the name.
Appreciate you.
And I love the growth you have also. Those numbers that you shared were powerful, especially coming out of the pandemic. What lessons did you learn during the pandemic that have made you a stronger and more sustainable business?
Yeah, just the power of collectivism. Believing in not only yourself, but believing and trusting in your team and realizing, we say it all the time, that anything is possible. It's really true. If you really just kind of block out the noise and the distractions that may be around you, there are a lot of things that even just customarily in our communities that we've had to deal with and focus on even just to survive, but if you really just kind of even in a sense, just keep the faith and keep your eyes on the why, why you're starting what you're starting, why you may be starting that business, why you're in the community that you're in, why your children may go to the schools that they go to, why you have the relationships and the connections that you have. They can be powerful and special. The three guys that are on that screen right now, we grew up in the same neighborhood in our elementary, formative years, but we weren't able to travel to each other's blocks. We never knew each other. We escaped our neighborhood to go to the best high school in Chicago that we were able to, become connected and aware of. And that's where we even met each other and began the journey of being friends and building on our relationship. Fast forward into today, us being husbands, fathers, and businessmen and just, solid men in our own regards and our own respective careers, being able to come together in a sense like this was something that originally we knew nothing about. We knew nothing about making bread in 2020 when Mark made the phone call and said, "Hey guys, no Black or African American owned or minority owned, product of its kind exists. Let's do this." And we trusted each other. We trusted the process from day one. We never wavered. We never said, "What if?" That's one of the main things I can really take away from this entire journey is we never said, "What if?" We saw something that didn't exist. And we looked to be that change that we wanted to see. We didn't wait for anybody else to do it. We didn't wait for the celebrity that we may follow, that we may be fond of, to start it. We didn't wait for Jay-Z. We didn't wait for anybody to really come along and tighten things up for us or give us that start. We used what we had. You have all you need if you use what you have. So that's probably my biggest takeaway of just believing in just a collective pool of energy and people believing in a common goal.
And Randy, do you have any questions of how these folks are making this dough out here? I've got bread puns. I've got bread puns for days.
Come on with it.
No, I'm happy they're making that bread. I was wondering if there are any plans to reach out to restaurants. I mean, there's companies like Subway who are saying that they want to be more diverse and inclusive, and especially with bringing on different vendors. So if you were talking in talks with any of them to make like sub rolls and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So we are actively building relationships and nurturing relationships. A lot of those things take time. You kind of don't maybe realize it, but behind the scenes, even as I mentioned Target before, we've been in business for 2 years. We've been in connection with Target, talking for 2 years, and things are coming to pass. So as they unfold, food service, that industry is definitely an industry that we are tapped into, and we are tapping into. Furthermore, just knowing again that a company of this nature didn't exist for people that look like us. So truly beyond the sky, there aren't even any limits as we see it. So yes, Subway, get ready. We're on the way. Starbucks, get on the way. We're on get ready. We're on the way. So we do our research. We do our best to be excellent in our business and in our endeavors and our relationships. So I would never say never to anything. Anything is possible, we believe, as long as you trust the process.
All right, well, thank you so much. And keep us updated on how we can become involved in your endeavors. Tell people again how they can get that Roland Martin discount code to order directly from you.
For sure. Thank you again, Roland Martin, wherever you are, for having us. Blackbreadco.com. You can take advantage of the unfiltered, exclusive 20% off discount code at our website, blackbreadco.com, 20% off. Unfiltered 20 is the exact code.
Thank you so much, John Jamel, of all that you guys are doing over there. I might get back into bread. I'm cutting carbs right now, but afterwards, I'm back on it. I'll be right back on that honey wheat as soon as we can. Thanks so much for joining us today.
We'll be ready. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I got to thank our panel today, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, as well as Randy Bryant. Sorry, Randy, I have a best friend named Robin Bryant, so I was calling you Robin all day, but she's a good person, so you're good company. I got to thank Roland Martin for letting me sit in and hold his seat down. He should be back tomorrow after his speech at Morehouse College. And as I say to end every show in the work, no matter the consequences, the fears to grip your senses, you got to hold on to your dreams. Hold on to your dreams, America.